Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing accountability letter to your ex. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing accountability letter to your ex. So if you have gone through a breakup and want to reconnect with an ex, it can seem a romantic thought to write them a handwritten letter, apologising for your mistakes and declaring your love. But is this likely to work? In today's podcast, I'll be giving you 3 points to consider regarding the accountability letter to your ex. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is dumper perspective. So if you're listening to this and you're a dumpee, then please keep listening because I'm going to be getting to your perspective very shortly. But first of all, in point number 1, we're going to be speaking about the dumper's perspective. So this is about if you're a dumper and the thoughts about whether or not you should be writing your ex an accountability letter if you've now changed your mind about breaking up with them. So the first thing to say is, but if you are a dumper and you have changed your mind, you need to reach out to your ex. This is a completely different point of view than if you're the dumpee. But if you're the dumper, then you need to make that contact. If you ended a relationship and now you've changed your mind, you need to reach out to your ex. But this should ideally be via text message or some type of messaging app. And this is because you can then know with more certainty that they have received your contact. Now, if you decide that you actually want to write a handwritten letter to your dumpee, then of course it does have more of a personal touch, and in essence it could be something to consider as a possibility. So when people speak about the accountability letter to an ex, I always believe that if you're the dumper, you do have some level of scope to consider writing your dumpee an accountability letter. However, like I've just said, I wouldn't necessarily put this as the first thought, because if you write your dumpee a letter and you post it in the mail, you don't know for certain that they have read that letter. Now, you might think, well, there are many ways I can find out if they've received it, and therefore I'm pretty sure they have read it. But I would say if you send a text message, some type of digital messaging app contact, then you're more likely to get an instant notification as soon as they have received the text, and then when they've likely read it. You will know if they've received it but just decided to keep it to one side and not actually read it. You will know the situation. You will know if they've got it and not read it. You will know if they've opened it up and given it a read. Even if you don't know for certain that they've read every single word, you will at least know if they have decided to open that message. Whereas if you send a physical, handwritten accountability letter, we can't say for certain that they've received it, it's in their hands, and it's in front of their eyes. We don't know what they've done with it. We don't know if somebody has intercepted it from their family, potentially, if they live with other people, and maybe thought, look, this is from their dumper, I can tell. I'm just going to make sure they don't see this because this isn't good for them, for whatever reason. You don't know if they have received it and they think to themselves, I don't want to read this, I'm just going to rip it up. You don't know what they've done. And if you don't have some type of notification from the mailman, from a postal delivery service, you might not even know for certain that it has actually got there. Now, I'm not trying to make you think that things get lost in the post, but unfortunately, some things occasionally do. The point is that an accountability letter does give you the opportunity to showcase your thoughts and, in essence, your apologies for breaking up with somebody from a perspective of a dumper. You can really showcase the personal touch by writing things via a pen, which now seems so olden day, you could say. It seems so classic, it seems so romantic. But it does give you that opportunity to do that. And I'm not saying that that's the worst option for you as a dumper, but what I am saying is that I still think a text message is probably in the modern day something which is obviously quicker, something which you're more likely to see and understand if they've actually read it. And ultimately, I don't know whether the differences between them reading a handwritten letter and a text message is going to make all of the difference. I would suggest it is more likely to be the content of what you have typed, what you have written, in comparison to the packaging. But as a dumper, you have that perspective where you could, if you want and if you feel it is right for you, send a handwritten snail mail accountability letter. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about accountability letter to your ex. And point number 2 is dumpee perspective. So in most instances, a dumpee should never contact their ex again unless their ex contacts them first. Now, there are a few caveats to this rule, but this is the generalized point of view that I would put to dumpees. And therefore, when we consider an accountability letter, straight off the bat, you can see that in my point of view, dumpees are very unlikely to be in the position where I think you should be reaching out to your ex. Now, like I said, there are caveats to the rule, there are exceptions to the rule. And if you want me to speak with you one-on-one about your specific unique circumstances so we can strategize and decide whether this is potentially a good option for you to reach out to your dumper, or whether you should be in the majority of instances where I think you should be moving forward with your life and never contacting your ex again unless they contact you first. If you want one-on-one support with this, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific circumstances. I will become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So if you're interested in this, please go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about my audio coaching service. So as I was saying, from a dumpee's perspective, most of the time you shouldn't be reaching out to your ex-dumper. And if you feel that you needed to apologise for something or take accountability, then ideally this should have been done at the time of a breakup. Because I always say that you do have the opportunity to say your piece at the time of the breakup. When the breakup's taken place, you say your thing. You get across your thoughts, you apologise if you need to, you take accountability where you see fit. This is the best moment to do this, at the time of a breakup, because when the dust has settled, when somebody has decided that they maintain their decision, they want to end the relationship, this is when I would suggest you enter what I refer to as my version of the no contact rule. Now, some dumpees will be thinking, yes, but what if my ex-dumper doesn't realise how much I love them? And let me just tell you, most dumpers will fully understand your thoughts and your position. Most dumpers will completely get the point of view you have, that you are in love with them and that you don't want this to end. And if you keep persisting with this position where you're telling your ex over and over again that you love them, you don't want this to end, you don't feel you can move forward without them, all of these things are just going to be putting your ex-dumper on a pedestal. You're inflating their value. They already know your point of view. They know you love them. They know you don't want it to end. You don't need to keep telling them. You can't persuade them to take you back. You can't beg or plead. This is very unlikely to work. Your ex-dumper needs to change their mind by regrowing romantic emotional attraction. And if you want advice and support via my podcasts, using the hints, tips, and advice that I give on how you can try and grow romantic emotional attraction in your ex's mind, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring the bell for notifications to check out all of the content that I've uploaded for the hints, tips, and advice on growing romantic emotional attraction. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about accountability letter to your ex. And point number 3 is, what if a dumpee has more to say? If a dumpee has more to say, if you feel that you really want to be writing your ex a letter, here is some additional information for you, the dumpee, to consider. In the rare exceptions where a dumpee has a legitimate reason to make contact, because like I said, there are exceptions to the rule. Occasionally, in those rare exceptions, I would still suggest that sending a text is generally a better option. It's definitely a better option than knocking on your ex's door. It's definitely a better option than waiting outside where they work. I would suggest that sending a text message, sending some type of digital message is still the best way to make contact. And like I said earlier in point number one of the main reasons for this is because you will know in a clearer way if your ex-dumper has actually read this text. Just as I said in point number one, from the opposite perspective. You want to know that your ex has received the message. You want to know that they have actually read it. But if you decide that sending a text is not personal enough, if you decide you need to write a letter, then the personal touch of a handwritten letter could possibly, in the rarest of instances, be deemed appropriate. But generally speaking, I believe the accountability letter from a perspective of a dumpee should be avoided. And I would say that something to consider as a dumpee is how your ex is going to take this letter. Now, like we've said, it has the personal touch, the handwriting. It feels like you mean what you say potentially more than if you're just typing it in a text. However, this can sometimes come across in a way which you don't mean it to. So, if your ex-dumper has ended the relationship, your ex-dumper does not want to be in a connection with you right now, and you write them a letter, for instance, which is many pages long, this might start to freak out your ex. This could feel pressurized. This could even feel, in some instances, a little creepy. I would say dumpees must be very careful not to chase their ex. And although I've just said, in the rarest of instances, there could be scope for a dumpee to possibly write their ex a letter, I would say this is a very rare moment indeed. It's rare enough for a dumpee to be in a legitimate position to even contact their dumper first. That's rare enough. But then to consider a moment where it would be appropriate to actually write them a letter, I think we're going into the very, very, very low percentage points. 1-2% of instances, even if that. And like I said, that's because it can be misconstrued. It can be misconstrued as something which is pressurizing. It can be misconstrued as somebody who isn't listening to their ex-dumper. Their ex-dumper does not want to be in a connection right now, and instead they receive a handwritten letter of 10 pages for them to read. Are they even going to read that? You've got to consider that as well. Now, if you believe that you have a legitimate reason, maybe you've spoke to me via audio coaching, and we've come to a conclusion that you are in that rare position where you could and maybe even should be reaching out to your dumper. Do you think that writing a handwritten letter is worth it? I would say most instances it's not. I would say sending a text can get across the information you need to. It seems less pressurized. Okay, it's not quite as personal, you could say, but nowadays I honestly think it is the best option. If you feel that you owe your ex-dumper an apology, if you want to take accountability for your behavior and you didn't do it at the time of a breakup, you didn't do it in the past and you want to do it now, then yes, there could be a situation where sending them a text is a good possibility for you. Writing them a letter, I just don't know if I feel that most of the time. Maybe there is a chance, but you need to be very careful that your ex-dumper isn't going to find this overwhelming. They're not going to find it creepy. They're not going to find it that you won't take no for an answer. They're not going to find it that you are chasing them, because if they feel it's too pressurized, if they feel overwhelmed, you will push them further away rather than bringing them closer to you, which is, of course, what you want to do. And I would suggest that a text message is a much better way of conveying an apology without the pressure and the importance, you could say, that a handwritten letter can give. Different people will read a letter in a different way. They'll take something different from it. Some might really appreciate the handwritten nature of it. Some people might think it's a lot of effort for somebody that they don't even want to hear from. Okay, you've got to be very, very careful. But for dumpees, in most instances, never contact your ex again in any way unless your ex contacts you first. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.